The mountain swallowed them whole. Lieutenant Caleb Vance pressed his face into blood-streaked ice as gunfire tore through the whiteout, his captain dead, his team trapped, and the storm turning every breath into a fight for survival. Somewhere in the frozen hell of Karin Ridge, the enemy wasn't just hunting them, they were herding them toward something worse. And when the youngest SEAL started shaking so hard his rifle rattled against stone, Vance knew grief is a luxury. Out here, even your heartbeat can get you killed. Before we dive in, if you're ready to follow this story to the very end, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey travels. Now let's begin. The storm hit Karin Ridge like God's own fist, white and merciless and absolute. Lieutenant Caleb Vance had been in country for 72 days. He'd run 17 missions, logged 48 hours of mountain reconnaissance, and memorized the call signs of every air asset within 100 clicks. What he hadn't done, what nobody had prepared him for, was this: making command decisions while his captain's blood was still warm on the rocks. The radio hissed static into his ear, a dead channel screaming nothing. "Command, this is Reaper 6 Actual, requesting immediate CAS, over." Vance kept his voice level, professional, like the academy had drilled into him, like his hands weren't shaking inside his gloves. Nothing. "Command, Reaper 6 Actual." "They're not coming, LT." The voice belonged to Sergeant Marcus Cole, the team's point man, a wiry Texan with 15 years and 100 stories Vance would never live long enough to hear. Cole lay 3 meters to Vance's left, pressed into a shallow depression in the granite, his rifle aimed at shadows that kept multiplying in the white. "Say again?" Vance said, though he'd heard perfectly. "Radio's cooked. Has been since the blast." Cole's breath fogged his scope. "We're alone up here." Alone. The word settled into Vance's chest like a stone. 70 meters upslope, behind a shattered overhang that used to be their rally point, Captain Kincaid was gone. Not missing, not wounded, gone. The IED had turned the ridge into a crater, and when the smoke cleared, there was nothing left but scorched rock and the kind of silence that makes men stop believing in miracles. Vance had seen the shrapnel pattern. He'd seen the blood spray. He'd seen what high explosive does to a human body at close range, and he knew that nobody walks away from that. But knowing didn't make it easier. "Reaper 6, this is Reaper 2. The voice crackled through the short-range net, tight and controlled. That was Petty Officer Eli Rourke, 23 years old, youngest on the team, currently holding the eastern flank with nothing but 60 rounds and a death grip on his M4. "I've got movement, multiple contacts, 200 meters, high side." Vance pulled his rifle tight and scanned the slope through his thermal optic. The storm turned everything into gray soup, but heat signatures didn't lie. He counted 8 figures moving in staggered formation down the ridgeline, using the terrain like they owned it. Because they did. This was their mountain, their storm, their killing ground. The mission brief had been clean: insert under darkness, locate the downed Air Force pilot, extract before dawn. Simple, surgical. The kind of op that gets you a handshake and a hot meal back at base. But the pilot was dead when they found him, executed, hands bound, left in the wreckage like a warning. And the storm that wasn't supposed to hit until 0400 had rolled in 2 hours early, cutting them off from air support, from exfil, from everything that keeps you alive in the Hindu Kush. Now they were 6 operators with a broken radio, dwindling ammunition, and an enemy that had somehow known exactly where to wait. "Lieutenant, we need to move." That was Staff Sergeant Thomas Harlow, call sign Doc, the team medic and the only man on the squad older than Vance. His voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen too many young officers freeze under pressure. "Sitting here, we're just targets." Vance knew he was right. He also knew that moving meant making a choice, and every choice he made now carried the weight of 6 lives. What would Kincaid do? The thought came unbidden, unwelcome. Kincaid had been with DevGru for 9 years. She'd run operations in 14 countries, earned 2 Bronze Stars and a reputation for bringing people home. When she spoke, seasoned warfighters listened. When she moved, you followed. Vance had been her 2IC for exactly 11 days. "Reaper 2, how's your ammo?" Vance asked. 4 mags plus sidearm, Rourke replied. Harlow? 3 mags, 1 frag, medical supplies. Cole? 5 mags. Still got the M72 if things get biblical. Vance did the math. Against an enemy force that was growing by the minute, on terrain that funneled them into kill zones, with 0 air support and a storm that wasn't letting up, the numbers didn't add up to anything good, but numbers were just numbers. Men made the difference. All right, listen up. Vance pulled up the digital terrain map on his wrist unit, the screen barely visible through the driving snow. Primary LZ is compromised, too exposed, and they know we're headed there. Secondary's 8 clicks northeast, but that route puts us through the Widow's Gauntlet. The Widow's Gauntlet. A narrow ravine that ran for 3 kilometers through sheer rock walls, with exactly 2 ways out and 100 ways to die. Local fighters called it the meat grinder. JSOC had marked it red on every tactical map for a reason. "You're joking," Cole said. "Do I sound like I'm joking, Sergeant?" A pause. Then, "No, sir. You sound like a man with a really bad plan. It's the only plan. They expect us to run for primary, so we don't. We go narrow, go fast, and we hit secondary before they can reposition. And if they're already there?" Vance met Cole's eyes across the frozen rock. "Then we punch through." It wasn't a good answer. It wasn't even a complete answer, but it was the only answer that didn't involve sitting still and dying. "Time to move," Vance said. "Rourke, collapse to Doc's position. Cole, you're on point. I'll take rear security. We bound by 2s, 5-meter intervals, stay off the skyline. Questions?" "Yeah," Cole said. "Who made you captain?" The words landed like a slap. Not cruel, just honest. The kind of honesty that happens when men stop pretending death isn't close. "Nobody," Vance said quietly. "But Kincaid's gone, and I'm what you've got, so move." Cole held his gaze for 3 seconds, an eternity in a firefight, then nodded once. "Roger that, Lieutenant. Let's go get dead somewhere warmer." They moved. 5 meters. Stop. Scan. Listen. Move. The wind howled across the ridge like something alive and angry, whipping snow into razor-edged curtains that sliced visibility down to nothing. Vance's world collapsed into a tunnel, the man in front of him, the ground beneath his boots, the weight of the rifle in his hands. His breath came in short, controlled bursts, each exhalation freezing into tiny crystals on his balaclava. He could feel his heartbeat in his temples, in his fingertips, in the base of his throat where fear lives. Don't think about Kincaid. Don't think about the crater. Don't think about... A muzzle flash strobed in the white 50 meters upslope. "Contact left!" Rourke's voice cracked through the radio. The mountain erupted. Automatic weapons fire tore through the storm, tracers arcing like angry hornets through the dark. Rock exploded into shrapnel as rounds chewed into granite. Vance threw himself behind a boulder, rifle up, finger on the trigger, searching for targets in the chaos. "Multiple shooters, high side!" Cole's voice, calm despite the bullets snapping past his head. "I count 6. No. A8. Another burst, closer this time. Vance saw the muzzle flash, locked onto it, squeezed twice. The flash disappeared. "Moving!" Harlow's voice, already shifting position, the instinct of a man who'd survived 100 firefights by never staying still. Vance's mind raced through the tactical calculus. Enemy has high ground, superior numbers, prepared positions. Friendly forces, 4 operators. Limited ammunition, 0 support. Classic L-shaped ambush. They want us to break east, straight into the kill zone. "Cole, shift right. Don't give them the angle." "On it!" More gunfire, the sharp crack, crack, crack of a K-pattern rifles mixing with the deeper thump of something heavier. A PKM, maybe, or a Dragunov. Didn't matter. Suppressing fire was suppressing fire, and it was keeping them pinned. Vance risked a glance over the boulder. Through the swirling snow, he caught glimpses of figures moving with coordinated precision, bounding forward in pairs, using cover like professionals. These aren't local militia. These are trained fighters. "Rourke, frag out!" Vance shouted. "Frag out!" The explosion lit up the mountainside for half a second, just long enough for Vance to see exactly how bad it was. 12 contacts. Maybe more. Encircling them like a noose. And then he saw something worse. 2 more fire teams moving down from the high ridge, cutting off their northern route. The enemy wasn't just attacking. They were maneuvering, trapping them. How did they know? The thought hit him like ice water. This wasn't a chance encounter. This was deliberate, planned. Someone had known they'd be here. LT, we gotta break contact now! Harlow's voice urgent but controlled. We stay here. We die here. Vance's mind raced. Break east? Into the ambush. Break west? Straight uphill into enemy positions. Break north? Already cut off. That left south. The Widow's Gauntlet. Smoke! Now! 2 canisters arced through the air, hissing as they hit the ground. Gray smoke billowed up, mixing with the snow, turning the world into complete chaos. Bounding back! Cole, you're with me! Harlow, Rourke, cover, and move! They moved like ghosts through the gray, boots pounding ice, rifles sweeping, every nerve alive with the electric certainty that the next second could be your last. A shadow appeared in the smoke to Vance's right. He spun, finger tightening, but it was Rourke, face pale, eyes wide, still moving, still alive. Keep pushing! Another burst of fire, rounds snapping past close enough to feel the air pressure. Vance returned fire, 3 controlled shots, then moved again. 30 seconds. That's all it took to cross 100 meters of mountainside and drop into the mouth of the Gauntlet, a narrow cut in the rock barely wide enough for 2 men abreast, walls rising 30 meters on either side. Vance hit the ground first, immediately pulling security back the way they'd come. Cole dropped in beside him, then Harlow, breathing hard, medical kit bouncing against his back. Rourke, where are you? Right behind. The world turned white, not from snow, from muzzle flash. A burst of automatic fire tore through the air where Rourke had been a heartbeat before. The young SEAL threw himself forward, hit the ice hard, slid the last 3 meters into the ravine. I'm good, he gasped, but his voice was shaking now, the adrenaline finally catching up to him. Vance grabbed his kit strap, hauled him deeper into the Gauntlet. You hit? No, I'm... Rourke's teeth were chattering, his whole body vibrating like a tuning fork. Jesus Christ. Hey, Vance gripped his shoulder, hard. Look at me. Look at me. You're good. We're moving. Stay tight. The kid nodded, but his eyes had that 1,000-yard glaze, the look that says the invincibility just died and mortality just walked in wearing your face. Behind them, the gunfire intensified. Shouts in Pashto echoed off the rocks. The enemy was regrouping, getting ready to push. How long till they follow us in? Harlow asked, already checking his rifle, his movements mechanical, efficient. 5 minutes, Cole said. Maybe less. Then we don't have 5 minutes. Vance pulled up his map again, fingers numb inside his gloves. The Gauntlet ran 3 clicks through the mountain's guts before opening onto the secondary LZ and E-Point Cinder, a small plateau with enough room for a fast exfil if the helo could punch through the weather. If. All right, new plan, Vance said. We move fast, stay quiet, and we do not, repeat, do not get bogged down in a firefight in this death trap. Someone pops up, you put them down, and keep moving. Clear? Crystal, Cole muttered. They pushed into the ravine, single file now, weapons high, every sense straining against the darkness and the howling wind that funneled through the rock like a jet engine. The Gauntlet was everything the name promised, narrow, claustrophobic, with 100 places for an ambush and nowhere to maneuver. The walls rose sheer on both sides, dark stone streaked with ice, the ground beneath their boots a treacherous mix of loose scree and frozen runoff. Vance moved on autopilot now, his mind splitting into 2 tracks. The immediate tactical picture, footfalls, angles, cover, and the bigger nightmare scenario building in the background. Someone sold us out. It was the only explanation. The enemy had known their route, known their timing, known exactly where to hit them, which meant someone on the inside had talked. Or worse, someone had planned this from the start. LT, Cole's voice, barely audible over the wind. We got a problem. Vance moved forward, pressed up beside him. Ahead, the Gauntlet narrowed even further, pinching down to less than 2 meters across. And blocking the path, sprawled across the ice like broken dolls, were 2 bodies. American bodies. Air Force flight suits, ripped and burned. No faces left, just meat and bone and frozen blood. The pilot. And someone else. Jesus, Rourke whispered. Vance felt something cold settle deeper into his gut. They brought them here, after the execution. Dumped them here like bait, Cole finished. Because that's exactly what it was. Bait. A message. We own this mountain, and you're next. Harlow knelt beside the nearest body, his medic's instinct overriding the horror. Multiple GSWs, close range, hands bound. This wasn't combat. His voice was flat, empty of emotion, the tone of a man who'd seen atrocities before and knew that feeling them wouldn't help. This was murder. Can we move them? Rourke asked quietly. Not without compromising our movement, Vance said. We mark the position, call it in if we get comms back. That's it? Rourke's voice cracked. We just leave them? Vance turned to face the kid, saw the anger and grief warring in his eyes. Right now, petty officer, our job is to survive long enough to make sure these men didn't die for nothing. You want to honor them? Get your head straight and stay alive. Copy? Rourke swallowed hard. Copy. They stepped over the bodies and kept moving. The gauntlet seemed to stretch on forever, the walls pressing in like a vice, the wind screaming overhead, the darkness absolute except for the faint green glow of their naudes. And then, somewhere behind them, they heard it. Voices. Footsteps. The enemy entering the ravine. How many? Harlow whispered. Cole tilted his head, listening. 8, maybe 10. Spread out, moving careful. They know we're bottlenecked, Vance said. They don't need to rush, they just need to squeeze. So what do we do? Vance looked at the narrow passage ahead, then back at the sound of approaching footsteps. Every tactical bone in his body screamed at him to find high ground, establish a defense, make them pay for every meter. But high ground didn't exist here. Defense was suicide. All they had was forward. We run, Vance said. And they did. Boots pounding ice, breath coming in ragged gasps, the four of them sprinted through the gauntlet like the devil himself was on their heels. The walls blurred past, the darkness swallowing them, the only sound their own desperate movement and the growing echo of pursuit behind. Vance's lungs burned, his legs screamed. His rifle felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Keep moving. Don't stop. Don't think. Just move. The ravine curved left, then right, opening up briefly into a slightly wider section where rockfall had created a natural amphitheater, and that's where they found the trap. 4 fighters waiting in prepared positions, rifles already aimed, faces covered, eyes cold. Professional, patient, perfect. The first burst caught Cole high on his kit, slamming him backward into the rocks. Harlow dropped flat, returning fire, his rifle barking short, controlled bursts. Rourke screamed something incoherent and charged forward, firing on full auto, the rookie mistake of a terrified man. Vance moved on pure instinct, angling left, finding cover, his rifle coming up smooth, sight picture perfect, trigger press clean. Breathe, squeeze, follow through, 1 down, shift, acquire, fire, 2 down. But there were more, always more. A round snapped past Vance's ear, close enough to feel the heat. He dropped, rolled, came up behind a boulder and saw Cole, Jesus Cole, pushing himself upright, blood streaming from his nose, his kit torn open but still functional. Body armor held, Cole shouted, spitting blood. I'm still good. Harlow, shift left. Rourke, watch your 6. The firefight compressed into a brutal, close-quarters nightmare. Muzzle flashes strobed in the dark. Ricochets whined off stone. The smell of cordite and copper filled the air. Vance put down another fighter, then another, his training taking over, muscle memory replacing thought. Shoot, move, communicate, repeat. And then just as suddenly as it started, it was over. 4 enemy dead, 4 SEALs still standing. But the victory was hollow, because behind them the sounds of pursuit had stopped, which meant the enemy wasn't chasing anymore, which meant they were setting up, waiting, blocking the exit. Doc, Vance said quietly. Cole's bleeding. Harlow was already moving, pulling Cole's kit open, assessing the damage with practiced hands. Blunt force trauma, probably cracked ribs. Lucky bastard. 6 inches lower and he'd be done. Can he move? Can you move, Sergeant? Cole spat blood, grinned through the pain. Brother, I can dance. Then we keep moving. E-Point Cinder is a click and a half straight ahead. We make it there, we call for exfil, and we get the hell off this mountain. And if they're waiting at the exit? Rourke asked, his voice small. Vance didn't answer right away. He didn't have a good answer. Instead, he pulled his rifle tight, checked his remaining ammunition, 2 mags plus 1 in the weapon, and looked at his team. Cole, injured but mobile, experienced, steady. Harlow, solid, reliable, the anchor. Rourke, scared, shaking, but still in the fight. And himself, a brand new lieutenant with a dead captain and a plan that was barely holding together. If they're waiting, Vance said finally, then we go through them, because that's what we do. We don't quit. We don't surrender. We fight until we can't fight anymore, and then we fight some more. Kincaid would expect nothing less. He didn't add the rest of the thought. Kincaid would have already gotten us out. Kincaid wouldn't have walked us into this mess. Kincaid was better than me in every way that mattered. But the dead don't lead. The living do. Even when the living have no idea what they're doing. Let's move, Vance said. They pushed deeper into the gauntlet, the walls narrowing again, the darkness pressing in from all sides. Vance could feel the mountain's weight above him, millions of tons of rock and ice, and for a moment the claustrophobia was so intense he could barely breathe. Focus, mission, team, get them home. The ravine twisted one more time, and then, impossibly, mercifully, he saw it. Light, not daylight. The storm was still raging, but the faint gray glow of open sky, marking the end of the gauntlet and the beginning of E-Point Cinder. Almost there, he whispered. They covered the last 200 meters in silence, weapons up, moving like they were walking through a minefield, because for all they knew, they were. And then they reached the mouth of the ravine and stopped dead. E-Point Cinder stretched out before them, a small plateau, maybe 50 meters across, ringed by rocky outcrops that provided decent cover and a clear line of sight for any approaching aircraft. It was also completely exposed. And standing in the middle of it, barely visible through the swirling snow, was a lone figure. Not enemy, not militia. American kit. SEAL loadout, rifle held low and easy, like someone who'd been waiting. For them. The figure turned, and even through the storm, even with blood caked across her temple and her movements stiff with pain, Vance knew. No. Impossible. She's dead. I saw the blast, I saw the crater, but the dead don't walk. And yet, there she was. Captain Mara Kincaid stood in the center of E-Point Cinder like a ghost made flesh, her eyes locked on Vance with an expression he couldn't read. Disappointment, maybe, or something colder. She didn't smile. She didn't explain. She just raised one hand in a slow, deliberate gesture that every operator knew. Rally on me. Cole whispered something that might have been a prayer. Rourke's rifle dipped, his hand shaking worse than before. Harlow just stared, his face carved from stone. And Vance felt the bottom drop out of his world. Because if Kincaid was alive, then everything had just changed. Every decision he'd made, every order he'd given, all of it was suddenly, terrifyingly irrelevant. He wasn't in command anymore. He never had been. Kincaid took one step forward, her voice cutting through the wind like a blade. Primary LZ is compromised. We move now. And somewhere in the storm behind them, the enemy closed in. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. The wind screamed across E-Point Cinder, whipping snow into sideways sheets that blurred everything except the impossible. Captain Mara Kincaid standing there like she'd never left. Like the explosion that had atomized the ridge hadn't touched her. Like death was something that happened to other people. Vance felt his world tilt sideways. Captain, the word came out strangled, disbelieving. Save it! Kincaid's voice was ice over steel. She moved toward them with a slight hitch in her stride, favoring her left side. Blood dried in a dark line from her temple down to her jaw. Her kit was scorched, one magazine pouch torn clean off, and when she shifted her rifle, Vance saw her wince. Ribs, probably broken, but her eyes were clear, sharp, and locked onto him with the kind of focus that made junior officers want to dig holes and hide. I said move. That means now, Lieutenant. The tone was a slap, command voice. The voice that had led 93 missions without a single operator lost. Until today. Cole recovered first, muscle memory, overriding shock. "Ma'am, we thought—" "I know what you thought." Kincaid cut him off, already moving past them toward the northern edge of the plateau. "You thought I was dead. You thought you were alone. You thought you'd run the gauntlet and live to tell about it." She stopped, turned, and her gaze swept over the four of them like a scalpel. "How'd that work out?" Silence. Vance felt heat crawl up his neck. "We made it through." "Barely." Kincaid's eyes flicked to Cole's torn kit, to Rourke's shaking hands, to the blood on all of them. "You walked straight into an ambush in the amphitheater, lost your interval discipline twice, and you're standing here on an exposed plateau with hostile forces converging from 3 directions." She tilted her head. "That sound about right?" Vance opened his mouth, closed it. Because she was right. Every word. "Captain," Harlow said carefully, his medic's instinct kicking in. "You need medical attention. That head wound is superficial." Kincaid didn't even look at him. "Concussion, maybe. Cracked ribs, definitely. But I can walk, shoot, and lead, which makes me functional. Questions?" No one had any. "Good. Then here's the situation." Kincaid pulled a small tablet from her chest rig, somehow still working despite everything, and brought up a tactical overlay. "Primary LZ is crawling with hostiles. They knew we were coming, knew our route, and they've been 3 steps ahead since insertion. This wasn't opportunistic. This was coordinated." "Someone talked," Cole said quietly. "Worse." Kincaid zoomed in on the map. "Someone planned this. The pilot's execution, the early storm, the timing of the ambush. It's all too clean, which means we have a leak somewhere in the chain, and until we know where, we trust no one outside this team." Vance's mind raced, trying to process. If primary is compromised, what about secondary? E-Point Cinder is burned too. Kincaid swiped the map, revealing new red markers clustered around their current position. "They're moving to cut us off. 20-plus fighters, well-equipped, well-trained. My guess? Wagner Group contractors mixed with local irregulars. The kind of people who get paid to make problems disappear." "So what's the play?" Harlow asked. Kincaid looked up from the tablet, and for the first time something flickered in her expression. Not quite a smile, but close. Predatory. "We stop running," she said, "and we make them regret following us." Rourke's voice cracked. "Ma'am, we're outnumbered 4-1, low on ammunition, and we've got no air support." 5-1, Kincaid corrected. "I'm back in the count." She tapped the map. "There's a tertiary exfil point 6 clicks northwest. K-Point Whiskey. It's off book, not in any mission brief, which means whoever sold us out doesn't know about it. We make it there, I've got a contingency beacon that'll bring in assets they can't ignore." 6 clicks through hostile territory, Cole said. "In a whiteout, with an enemy force actively hunting us." "Yes." "That's insane." "Yes." Kincaid's eyes glinted. "It's also the only option that doesn't end with all of us in shallow graves. So unless you've got a better plan, Sergeant, I suggest you shut up and prep to move." Cole grinned despite himself. "Now that's the captain I remember." But Vance wasn't grinning. He was watching Kincaid, really watching, and something didn't add up. The blast that had hit the ridge had been catastrophic. He'd seen the crater, seen the shrapnel pattern, seen the blood. No one walks away from that kind of explosion without serious trauma, and yet here she was, moving like she'd barely been touched. And the way she'd appeared at E-Point Cinder, already in position, already waiting, like she'd known they'd come through the gauntlet, like she'd planned it. "Captain," Vance said slowly, "how did you survive the blast?" Kincaid's expression went flat. "Does it matter?" "It might." She held his gaze for a long moment, and Vance felt the weight of it, not just rank, but something deeper. The kind of pressure that comes from someone who's forgotten more about combat than you'll ever learn. "I saw the IED trigger a half-second before it blew," she said finally. "Dove behind the overhang, got lucky. Shrapnel tore up my kit but missed anything vital. When I came to, you were already moving and the enemy was closing in. So I did what any operator would do. I adapted." "By flanking the ambush," Harlow said, understanding dawning. Those shots in the tree line during the primary LZ assault, that was you. Someone had to keep you idiots alive. Kincaid checked her rifle, her movements mechanical, efficient. Now stop asking questions and start moving. We've got 60 seconds before the first pursuit element reaches visual range, and I'd prefer not to be here when they arrive. She turned and started walking, not waiting to see if they'd follow, because she knew they would. Vance felt the frustration coil in his chest, frustration and something else he couldn't name. Resentment, maybe. Or shame. Because every decision he'd made since Kincaid's apparent death had been him trying to fill boots that were too big. And now that she was back, he was suddenly brutally unnecessary. Just another junior officer. Replaceable. Lieutenant Cole's voice was quiet, meant only for him. You did good. Got us through the gauntlet. Kept everyone moving. That's leadership. She wouldn't have walked us into that ambush in the first place, Vance said. Maybe, maybe not. Cole clapped him on the shoulder. But she's not the one who had to make the calls with zero intel and a broken radio. You did that. Don't forget it. Before Vance could respond, Kincaid's voice cut through the wind. We're moving in a modified diamond formation. I'll take point. Cole, right flank. Harlow, left. Vance, rear security. Rourke, your center. And if you so much as sneeze without checking your backdrop, I will personally make you regret it. Clear? A chorus of affirmatives. They moved out. The terrain shifted from the open plateau into a series of broken ridges and shallow defiles, the kind of ground that provided cover, but also 1,000 places for an ambush. Kincaid led them through it like she'd walked the route 100 times, never hesitating, always choosing the path that kept them off the skyline and out of natural choke points. Vance watched her from the rear, his mind churning. She moved like someone who'd done this before, not just combat, but this specific mission, this specific mountain. The confidence wasn't just experience, it was knowledge. And that bothered him more than he wanted to admit. They'd been moving for 20 minutes when the first contact came. Not a firefight, just voices, distant and muffled by the storm, somewhere off to the east. Enemy patrols sweeping the ridges, calling to each other in Pashto and Russian. Kincaid raised a fist. Everyone froze. She tilted her head, listening, then made a series of hand signals. 4 contacts, 200 meters, moving south. Then she did something that made Vance's blood run cold. She smiled. Not a friendly smile. A hunter's smile. Kincaid motioned to Cole and Harlow, a quick series of gestures that meant flank left, flank right, wait for my signal. Then she looked at Vance and Rourke, pointed down, and mouthed one word. Stay. And before Vance could object, she disappeared into the snow like a ghost. Rourke shifted nervously beside him. What's she doing? I don't know, Vance whispered, but whatever it is, it's not standard operating procedure. They waited. 30 seconds, 60, 90. The voices grew closer, the enemy patrol moving with the casual confidence of men who thought they controlled the battlefield. And then, from somewhere impossibly close, a single suppressed shot cracked through the storm, followed by silence. Then another shot. And another. 3 shots. 3 kills. Kincaid's voice came through the short-range net, calm and unhurried. 4 down, path is clear, resume movement. Vance and Rourke moved forward, and what they found made Vance's stomach twist. 4 bodies sprawled in the snow, each one a perfect headshot. No wasted ammunition, no excess movement, just clean surgical kills executed with the kind of precision that came from someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Kincaid stood among them, reloading her rifle, her expression as neutral as if she'd just finished a training drill. Cole and Harlow emerged from the flanks, their faces carefully blank. Ma'am, Harlow said quietly, that was necessary. Kincaid didn't look up. They were in our path. Now they're not. Keep moving. She walked past them without waiting for a response. Vance stared at the bodies, something cold settling in his gut. This wasn't just combat. This was execution, methodical, efficient, and Kincaid had done it without hesitation, without remorse, like flipping a switch. She's different, Rourke whispered. No, Cole said quietly. She's exactly the same. We just forgot what that looks like. They pushed on. The storm intensified as they moved deeper into the mountains, the wind howling like something alive and angry. Visibility dropped to near zero, forcing them to move almost blind, relying on GPS and sheer will to keep the right heading. Vance's hands were numb inside his gloves. His face felt like frozen meat. Every breath was a knife of cold air in his lungs. But he kept moving, because stopping meant dying. And because somewhere ahead Kincaid was leading them toward salvation or disaster, and he still couldn't tell which. They'd covered another 2 clicks when Kincaid called a halt in a shallow depression that provided minimal cover but at least blocked the worst of the wind. 5 minutes, she said. Hydrate. Check your gear. Then we pushed the last 4 clicks without stopping. The team collapsed into the snow, grateful for even a brief respite. Vance watched as Harlow moved to Kincaid's position. Captain, let me look at that head wound. I'm fine. With respect, ma'am, you're not. You've been moving for hours with a probable concussion and broken ribs. I said I'm fine, Doc. The edge in her voice could have cut steel. Save your supplies for someone who needs them. Harlow held her gaze for a moment, then nodded slowly. Roger that. But as he moved away, Vance caught the look on the medic's face. Concern mixed with something else. Suspicion, maybe. Or fear. Vance pulled out his canteen, took a long pull of water that tasted like metal and regret. His mind kept circling back to the same questions. How had Kincaid survived? How had she known they'd come through the gauntlet? How had she made those shots in conditions where even seeing a target should have been impossible? You're thinking too loud, LT. Vance looked up. Cole had settled in beside him, his rifle across his lap, his face a mask of exhaustion. Something's wrong with this whole thing, Vance said quietly. You mean besides being trapped on a mountain with half the Taliban trying to kill us? I mean with her. Vance nodded toward Kincaid, who stood apart from the team, staring into the storm like she could see through it. She's not just lucky. She's too prepared. Too precise. Like she knew this would happen. Cole was quiet for a moment. You think the captain set us up? I don't know what I think. Well, I know what I think. Cole's voice dropped even lower. I think she's the only reason we're still breathing. I think she's the best operator I've ever served with. And I think if she wanted us dead, we'd be dead already. That's not the point. Then what is the point, Lieutenant? Cole's eyes were hard now. You want to question the captain's methods? Fine. Do it after we're off this mountain. But right now, she's the only thing standing between us and a mass grave. So maybe, just maybe, you should shut up and follow orders. The words hit like a fist, because Cole was right. Whatever Vance's doubts, whatever his suspicions, they didn't matter. Not here, not now. Survival mattered. Getting the team home mattered. Everything else was just noise. Time's up, Kincaid called. On your feet, we're moving. They rose like old men, joints stiff, muscles screaming, and formed up without a word. Kincaid checked her GPS one more time, then looked at each of them in turn. The next 4 clicks are going to be the hardest. The terrain gets worse, the weather's not improving, and the enemy knows we're running out of options. They're going to push hard to cut us off before we reach K Point Whiskey. So we push harder, Harlow said. Exactly. Kincaid's expression was unreadable. And if anyone falls behind, we leave them. No heroics, no last stands. We get to that exfil point, or we don't. Understood? The silence that followed was heavy as lead, because everyone knew what she meant. If you can't keep up, you're already dead. Understood, Vance said, his voice hollow. Good. Then let's finish this. They moved into the teeth of the storm. The mountain fought them every step. The wind tried to push them off cliffs they couldn't see. The ice turned every footfall into a gamble. The cold leached heat from their bodies faster than they could generate it, and the altitude made every breath feel like sucking air through a straw. But they kept moving. Because that's what you did. You moved until you couldn't move anymore. And then you moved some more. Vance lost track of time. Minutes blurred into hours. The world became nothing but the man in front of him, the ground beneath his boots, and the endless, punishing march. His mind drifted, skating close to hypothermia-induced delirium. He thought about the academy, about his father, a Marine colonel who'd expected excellence and settled for disappointment. About the drill instructors who'd promised him that leadership was something you learned. They'd lied. Leadership wasn't learned. It was earned, proven, forged in moments like this, when everything was falling apart and people were looking to you for answers you didn't have. And he'd failed. Failed Kincaid, who'd trusted him as her 2IC, failed the team, who'd followed him into ambush after ambush, failed himself, who'd thought he was ready for command. LT, Rourke's voice tight with strain. I can't feel my feet. Vance snapped back to reality. The kid was stumbling, his movements uncoordinated, his face pale as death. How long? Vance asked. Maybe 20 minutes? Maybe longer? Frostbite. Advanced stage. Can you walk? I'm walking now, aren't I? But Rourke's voice cracked, betraying him. Vance keyed his radio. Captain, we've got a problem. Rourke's showing signs of severe frostbite. Kincaid's response was immediate. Can he continue? For now, but not for long. A pause. Then, understood. Keep him moving. We're 2 clicks out. That was it. No sympathy, no adjustment to the plan. Just keep moving. Vance grabbed Rourke's arm, pulled it over his shoulder. Lean on me. We're almost there. You don't have to, shut up and walk. They pushed on, Vance half carrying the younger operator, his own exhaustion multiplying with every step. Ahead, Kincaid moved like a machine, tireless, relentless, her pace never wavering despite her injuries. How? The question burned in Vance's mind. How is she still moving? How is she still standing? And then, cutting through his thoughts, Harlow's voice on the radio. Contact front. Multiple hostiles, 500 meters, blocking the route to K Point Whiskey. Everyone stopped. Kincaid raised her optic, scanning the terrain ahead. Through the swirling snow, Vance could barely make out the shapes. A dozen, maybe more, spread across the ridgeline in prepared positions. They'd been cut off. Again. They knew, Cole said, his voice dead. They knew where we were going. Kincaid lowered her optic, her expression unreadable. And for the first time since she'd reappeared, Vance saw something in her eyes that looked like doubt. Captain? Harlow's voice was careful. Orders? Kincaid stared at the enemy positions, her jaw tight, her mind clearly racing through options that were rapidly running out. Finally, she spoke. We go through them. Ma'am, that's suicide, Cole said. We're exhausted, low on ammunition, and they've got the high ground. We'll be cut to pieces before we make it halfway. Then we better move fast. Kincaid checked her rifle, her movements sharp, almost angry. Because there is no other option. We go through or we die here. Those are the choices. Pick one. The team exchanged glances, and Vance saw it in their faces. The calculations. The acceptance. They were all thinking the same thing. This is how it ends. But before anyone could respond, a sound cut through the wind, distant but growing louder. Rotors, a helicopter. Kincaid's head snapped up, her hand already moving to her radio. That's not ours. We didn't call for exfil yet. The sound grew closer, and through the storm, Vance caught a glimpse of it. A Russian-made Mi-8, running low and fast, searchlight cutting through the white. Hunting. They've got air assets, Harlow said, disbelief in his voice. Since when do local fighters have air support? Since someone with very deep pockets decided we were worth killing, Kincaid said. Her voice was cold, controlled, but Vance heard the edge beneath it. Fear. For the first time, Captain Mara Kincaid was afraid. The helicopter swept overhead, the rotor wash blasting snow in every direction, the searchlight probing the ground like a finger of judgment. They pressed into the rocks, trying to make themselves invisible, knowing it wouldn't be enough. The light swept past them once, twice, and then it stopped, locked directly on their position. Scatter! Kincaid screamed. The minigun opened up a heartbeat later, the world erupting into a screaming wall of lead that chewed through rock and ice and anything else in its path. Vance threw himself sideways, felt rounds snap past so close he could taste the copper, and hit the ground rolling. Somewhere, someone was screaming. The helicopter made another pass, the minigun raking the ridge, kicking up geysers of pulverized stone. Vance scrambled for cover, his ears ringing, His vision blurred, and when he looked back, he saw Rourke, down, not moving. No! Vance surged to his feet, but Cole was already there, grabbing Rourke's kit, dragging him into cover with strength born of pure adrenaline. The helicopter circled, coming around for another pass. And Vance knew with absolute certainty that they weren't going to survive this. They'd run out of luck, out of options, out of time. Kincaid appeared beside him, her face spattered with blood. Not hers. Her eyes wild but focused. "Listen to me," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "I can stop that bird, but I need 30 seconds and I need you to trust me." "How?" Vance shouted over the rotor noise. She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled something from her kit, a small device that looked like a radio but wrong somehow, the design too clean, too advanced. Not American issue, not anything Vance recognized. "What the hell is that?" Kincaid's eyes met his, and in them he saw something that made his blood run cold. Calculation, resolve, and a secret so deep it had its own gravity. "Insurance," she said, and before he could stop her, she pressed a button. The effect was immediate. The helicopter jerked sideways, its flight path suddenly erratic, the searchlight sweeping wildly. The pilot's voice crackled over emergency frequencies, panicked, confused. And then the Mi-8's engine coughed once, stuttered, and died. The helicopter fell from the sky like a stone, hit the ridgeline 300 meters away, and erupted into a fireball that briefly turned the storm into day. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Vance stared at Kincaid, his mind struggling to process what he'd just seen. "What did you just do?" Kincaid didn't answer. She was already moving to where Rourke lay in the snow, Harlow kneeling beside him, working frantically. "Talk to me, Doc," she said, her voice steady again, like she hadn't just brought down a helicopter with a device that shouldn't exist. "He's alive," Harlow said. "Took a round through the shoulder, missed the artery by maybe half an inch. He's in shock, losing blood, but he'll live if we can get him stabilized." "Then stabilize him. We move in 2 minutes." "Captain, 2 minutes, Doc. That's all we have before the enemy force on that ridge figures out what happened and comes looking for survivors." Kincaid's voice was iron. "So work fast." Harlow's hands moved with practiced efficiency, packing the wound, applying pressure, loading Rourke with enough morphine to keep him conscious but functional. And Vance watched Kincaid, really watched her, and saw the truth that had been hiding in plain sight. She wasn't just lucky. She wasn't just skilled. She was something else entirely, something they didn't teach at the academy, something that made hardened operators look at her like she was a force of nature wearing a uniform. "Who are you?" Vance asked quietly. Kincaid turned to look at him, and for a moment, just a moment, the mask slipped. He saw exhaustion, pain, and something deeper, loneliness. "I'm someone who keeps people alive," she said. "That enough for you, Lieutenant?" It wasn't. Not even close. But before he could press, gunfire erupted from the ridgeline, the enemy forces regrouping, closing in. "Time's up," Kincaid said. "Cole, you've got Rourke. Harlow, take point. Vance, rear security. We're making a run for K Point Whiskey, and we're doing it now." "They're between us and the exfil point," Vance said. "Not for long." And there it was again, that predator's smile. Kincaid pulled a small cylinder from her kit, twisted the top, and threw it toward the enemy positions. The explosion was massive, far too big for a standard grenade. Thermite, Vance realized. Military-grade thermite that burned at temperatures hot enough to melt steel. The entire ridgeline erupted into white-hot flames that even the storm couldn't extinguish. Enemy fighters scattered, screaming, their formation dissolving into chaos. And through the gap they'd created, Kincaid led them at a dead run. Vance's legs pumped mechanically, his mind numb, his body running on fumes and fear. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit. Ahead, the unknown. And in the lead, Captain Mara Kincaid, whatever she really was, carved a path through the storm like she'd done it 100 times before. They broke over a final rise, and suddenly there it was. K Point Whiskey. A small clearing, barely 20 meters across, marked by a single boulder with a painted symbol Vance didn't recognize. Kincaid went straight to it, pulled another device from her kit, this one definitely not standard issue, and activated it. A beacon, but not any beacon Vance had ever seen. "How long?" Cole gasped, setting Rourke down as gently as he could. 3 minutes, Kincaid said. "Maybe less." "And if they get here first?" Kincaid's hand moved to her sidearm, her expression answer enough. "Then we make our last stand." The 3 minutes stretched like hours. They formed a defensive perimeter. What was left of their ammunition distributed, every weapon trained on the approaches. Vance's hand shook as he reloaded, his body finally starting to shut down, the adrenaline that had kept him moving beginning to fade. He looked at his team, Cole, battered but standing. Harlow, exhausted but focused. Rourke, barely conscious, his shoulder a mess of blood and bandages. And Kincaid, standing apart, her eyes on the storm, waiting. Always waiting. Like she knew something they didn't. And then cutting through the wind, a new sound. Rotors. Different this time. Heavier. American. A Black Hawk materialized from the white door gunner already scanning for threats. The pilot putting the bird down with precision that spoke of countless combat insertions. "Move!" Kincaid shouted. They ran. Cole hauled Rourke toward the helo, Harlow right behind him. Vance brought up the rear, his rifle covering their withdrawal, his mind still reeling from everything that had happened. He was the last one to board, his hand reaching for the doorframe, when a shot cracked through the storm. Pain exploded in his side, white-hot and stunning. He stumbled, felt hands grabbing him, pulling him into the helicopter, voices shouting. The Black Hawk lifted off as enemy fire intensified, rounds pinging off the armored hull. Vance lay on the floor, staring up at the ceiling, his vision starting to tunnel. Somewhere above him, Kincaid's voice. "Stay with me, Lieutenant. That's an order." And then darkness. When he came back, seconds or hours later, he couldn't tell. The first thing he saw was Kincaid's face, bloodied and intense, her hands pressed to his side, stopping the bleeding. "Welcome back," she said. "Did we?" Vance's voice was barely a whisper. "Did we make it?" "We made it." "Rourke?" "Alive. Stable. You all are." Something flickered in her eyes. "You did good, Lieutenant. Better than you think." Vance tried to sit up, but pain lanced through him. "The device. The one you used on the helicopter. What?" "Later." Kincaid's voice was gentle but final. "Rest now. Questions later." But Vance saw it in her face. Maybe never. Because some secrets, he realized, were kept for a reason. Some truths were too dangerous to speak aloud. And some operators, like Captain Mara Kincaid, lived in shadows so deep that even their own teams would never truly know them. The Black Hawk banked hard, leaving the mountain behind, carrying them toward safety. But as Vance's eyes drifted closed, one thought burned bright. This isn't over. Whatever just happened, whoever Kincaid really is, this is just the beginning. The Black Hawk shuddered violently and Vance's eyes snapped open. Not from turbulence, from impact. The instrument panel exploded in a shower of sparks. The pilot's voice cut through the chaos, clipped and professional despite the emergency. "We're hit. Missile strike, starboard engine compromised." The helicopter lurched sideways, the world tilting at an impossible angle. Through the open door, Vance caught a glimpse of mountains rushing up to meet them, snow-covered peaks that looked like teeth waiting to chew them to pieces. "Brace, brace, brace!" The impact was catastrophic. Metal screamed, bodies slammed against restraints. The rotor blades shredded themselves against rock, sending fragments spinning into the storm like shrapnel. Vance felt his ribs compress against the safety harness, felt his head snap forward, felt the world compress into a single moment of white-hot violence. And then stillness. Terrible, ringing stillness. Vance hung suspended in his harness, upside down, blood rushing to his head. Smoke filled the cabin, acrid and choking. Somewhere, an alarm was screaming. Somewhere else, someone was groaning in pain. "Sound off," Kincaid's voice cut through the haze like a blade. Not loud, not panicked, just absolute command. "Now." Cole, alive, coughing. Mostly. Harlow, conscious. More coughing. Rourke still out but breathing. "Pilot?" Kincaid asked. Silence from the cockpit. Then the co-pilot's voice, shaky but functional. "Captain's dead. Neck broke on impact. I'm mobile. Then get us a location and a status report. Vance? It took Vance 2 tries to find his voice. Here. Can you move? He tried. Pain lanced through his side where the bullet had grazed him, but nothing felt broken. Yeah? Good. Everyone out, now. This bird's leaking fuel and we've got maybe 90 seconds before something sparks and turns us into a fireball. The team moved with mechanical efficiency born of 1,000 training drills. Harnesses released, bodies extracted. Rourke carried between Cole and Harlow, still unconscious but alive. They stumbled out into the storm, putting distance between themselves and the downed helicopter. 50 meters. 75. 100. The explosion came at 1:15. The Black Hawk erupted in a ball of orange flame that turned the white landscape into a hellish snapshot of war. The heat washed over them even at 100 meters, the shockwave knocking Vance to his knees. When his ears stopped ringing, he turned to look at what was left of their ride home. Burning wreckage. Twisted metal. And the pilot's body, still strapped in the cockpit, already being consumed by flames. They shot us down. The co-pilot, a young CW-2 named Martinez, stared at the wreck with hollow eyes. Surface-to-air missile, Russian make, probably a 9K-338. They were tracking us the whole time, just waiting for the right moment. Location, Kincaid interrupted. I need our position. Martinez pulled out a handheld GPS with shaking fingers. We're approximately 14 clicks northeast of K Point Whiskey, middle of nowhere, and the emergency beacon went down with the bird. Backup beacon. Was in the cockpit. With the captain. Martinez's voice cracked. We're dark. Command doesn't know we're down. And with this storm, they won't be able to mount a search and rescue until... I know. Kincaid's face was carved from stone. She pulled her tablet out again, but this time when she activated it, the screen flickered and died. Damaged in the crash. Comms? Harlow checked his radio. Dead. EMP from the missile strike probably fried everything electronic within 200 meters. Cole laughed, a sound without humor. So we're back where we started. No comms, no air support, no way home. And now we've got a debris field broadcasting our position to every hostile within 10 clicks. Not exactly where we started, Vance said quietly. He was staring at the wreckage, at the column of black smoke rising into the storm. We're worse off. We've got a wounded operator, we just lost our pilot, and we left a trail of breadcrumbs straight to our position. Kincaid didn't respond. She was scanning the ridgelines, her jaw tight, her mind clearly racing through options. For the first time since she'd reappeared, Vance saw something that looked like uncertainty in her eyes. Captain? Harlow's voice was careful. Orders? The seconds stretched. We move, Kincaid said finally. Northeast into the high terrain, find defensible ground, establish a perimeter, and wait for the storm to clear enough for SAR assets to locate us. That could be days, Cole said. Then we hold for days. Ma'am, with respect, Vance stepped forward, ignoring the pain in his side. That's a death sentence. We're injured, low on ammunition, and the enemy knows we're here. If we sit still, they'll surround us and pick us off. You have a better plan, Lieutenant? Yeah, we keep moving. Push through to the extraction corridor, use the terrain to our advantage, and force them to chase us across ground where we can dictate the engagement. Kincaid's eyes narrowed. That's aggressive. And risky. So is sitting still and hoping rescue finds us before the enemy does. A long silence. The team watched the exchange like spectators at a gunfight, not sure who to back. Finally, Kincaid nodded slowly. You're right. We move. But we move smart. No more running blind into ambushes. We do this by the book, with proper recon and fire discipline. She looked at each of them in turn. And if anyone has a problem with that, speak now. No one spoke. Good. Cole, take point. Harlow, you've got Rourke. Martinez, stay close to me. Vance? The word died on her lips, because that's when they heard it. Voices. Not distant this time. Close. Maybe 200 meters, carried on the wind from multiple directions. The enemy, closing in. Fast. How many? Cole whispered, his rifle already up. Kincaid tilted her head, listening. 20, maybe more. Multiple elements, coordinated approach. They're not scouting, they're hunting. We can't fight that many, Harlow said. No, Kincaid agreed. We can't. She reached into her kit one more time, and what she pulled out made Vance's blood run cold. Another device. Smaller than the one she'd used on the helicopter, but with the same wrong design, the same sense of technology that didn't belong in a standard operator's loadout. What is that? Martinez asked. Kincaid didn't answer. She was adjusting settings on the device, her fingers moving with practiced precision, her face a mask of concentration. Captain, Vance's voice was hard now. What is that? She looked up, and in her eyes he saw calculation, the cold math of someone making a choice that couldn't be unmade. A last resort, she said quietly. Then she activated it. Nothing happened. For 3 heartbeats, nothing changed. The storm kept howling. The voices kept getting closer. The world kept spinning toward disaster. And then, every electronic device within a kilometer radius died. Radios, GPS units, night vision optics. Even the enemy's communications gear. Vance could hear the confusion in their voices as their equipment suddenly went dark. EMP burst, Harlow breathed. You just triggered a localized electromagnetic pulse. Proximity detonation specifically, Kincaid said, already moving. Gives us maybe 5 minutes before they adapt, so we use those 5 minutes to disappear. That's not standard issue, Cole said, his voice tight. That's not even black budget. That's classified, and we're not discussing it. Kincaid's tone left no room for argument. Now move before they figure out we're still here. They ran. Not in formation this time, just pure, desperate flight through terrain that wanted them dead almost as much as the enemy did. The ground was broken, treacherous, full of hidden crevasses and unstable rock. But fear was an excellent motivator. They'd covered maybe 300 meters when Rourke started seizing. Harlow called the halt immediately, lowering the young SEAL to the ground with practiced care. He's crashing, blood pressure's dropping, pupils dilated. The shoulder wound must have hit something we missed. Stabilize him, Kincaid ordered. I can't, not here, not with what I've got left. Harlow's hands moved anyway, checking vitals, trying to find the bleed. He needs a trauma center, real surgery. We're beyond field medicine now. Then keep him alive until we can get him to one. Ma'am, that's an order, Doc. Harlow's jaw clenched, but he nodded. His hands kept moving, doing what they could with what they had, buying time they might not have to spend. Vance watched Kincaid's face, saw the calculation there. The brutal arithmetic of combat leadership. 1 wounded operator, 5 mobile, 20+ enemy forces closing in. The math didn't work. Not unless someone stayed behind. Don't even think about it, Vance said quietly. Kincaid looked at him. Excuse me? I know what you're thinking. Someone stays behind, buys time, lets the rest escape. He stepped closer. It's not happening. Lieutenant, we don't leave people behind. That's the deal. That's always been the deal. The deal, Kincaid said, her voice dropping to something dangerous, is that I make the calls, not you. And if I decide that one sacrifice saves 5 lives, then that's what happens. Then it'll be me, Vance said. I'm wounded anyway. I can hold a position as well as anyone. No. Captain, I said no. Her eyes were ice. You want to make command decisions, Lieutenant? Fine, but not today. Today you follow orders, or I will relieve you right here and now, your choice. The standoff stretched between them, heavy as gravity. Finally, Vance nodded once. Yes, ma'am. Good. Now get Rourke up. We're moving in 60 seconds, whether Doc's ready or not. But they didn't get 60 seconds. They got 15. The first shots came from the North Ridge. Suppressed fire, professional, accurate. Rounds snapped past close enough to feel, kicking up snow in neat little geysers. Contact north! The team scattered, finding cover in rocks and depressions, returning fire in controlled bursts. But Vance could see the problem immediately. They were in a natural bowl, exposed from 3 sides, with the enemy holding every advantage. Classic kill zone. We need to break contact, Cole shouted. Southwest through the defile. Another burst of gunfire, this time from the east. 2 enemy fire teams, maneuvering with textbook precision, closing the noose. They were being herded. Again. Vance felt the anger rising in his chest, hot and sharp and electric. Anger at the mountain, at the enemy, at the impossible situation that kept finding new ways to kill them. But mostly anger at himself, for following, for doubting, for being the junior officer who couldn't make the hard calls when it mattered. "Kincaid!" he shouted. "We need to—" The explosion cut him off. Not a grenade, something bigger. A rocket-propelled device that hit the rocks 20 meters from their position and turned the world into shrapnel and smoke. When Vance's ears stopped ringing, he heard Martinez screaming. The co-pilot was down, his leg torn open from knee to hip, bone visible through the wound. Harlow was already moving toward him, but enemy fire kept him pinned. "Covering fire!" Kincaid's voice cut through the chaos. She rose from cover and did something Vance had never seen before. She walked. Not ran. Not sprinted. Walked. Straight into the kill zone, her rifle up, firing with mechanical precision. One shot, one kill, moving and shooting like she was on a training range instead of in a firefight. Enemy fighters dropped. 1, 2, 3, 4. The incoming fire slackened, confusion spreading through the enemy ranks as their people started dying faster than they could process. Kincaid didn't slow down. She moved through the storm like death incarnate, her movements economical, efficient, beautiful in their lethality. Every shot found a target. Every target went down. And Vance realized something that made his blood run cold. She wasn't just good. She was operating on a completely different level than everyone else. "What the hell is she?" Cole breathed, staring. Vance didn't have an answer. Kincaid reached Martinez, grabbed his kit with one hand while still firing with the other, and dragged him back toward cover. Harlow intercepted them halfway, taking the co-pilot's weight, getting him behind the rocks. "How bad?" Kincaid shouted. "Femoral arteries compromised. I need 5 minutes to clamp it or he bleeds out." "You've got 3. Cole, Vance, hold the north approach. Don't let them flank." Vance moved on autopilot, his rifle coming up, his finger finding the trigger. Beside him, Cole was firing in short, controlled bursts, his face a mask of concentration. But there were too many. For every enemy fighter they dropped, 2 more appeared. The pressure was building, the noose tightening, and Vance could feel the endgame approaching with the inevitability of gravity. They were going to die here. All of them. Unless— "Captain!" Vance's voice was rough. "The device, the one you used on the helicopter, can you— It's single use," Kincaid shouted back. "Already burned. Then what do we do?" Kincaid's eyes met his across the kill zone, and for the first time he saw something that looked like desperation. She didn't have an answer. The legendary Captain Kincaid, who always had a plan, who always brought people home, was out of options. The realization hit Vance like a physical blow. They were on their own, no air support, no rescue, no miracles, just 6 operators against an enemy force that wanted them dead, and had the numbers to make it happen. This is it, Vance thought. This is where it ends. And something inside him broke. Not from fear, not from despair, from rage. Pure, incandescent rage at a universe that kept taking and taking and taking until there was nothing left to give. "No," Vance said aloud. "What?" Cole looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "No." Louder this time. "This is not how we die. Not here. Not like this." "LT, I appreciate the sentiment, but—" Vance stood up, fully exposed, completely vulnerable, and he started walking, not toward cover, not toward safety, toward the enemy. "Vance, what the hell are you doing?" Kincaid's voice, sharp with alarm. He didn't answer. He was done answering, done following, done being the junior officer who deferred to everyone else's experience. His rifle came up and he fired. Not wild spray and pray. Not panic fire. Controlled. Precise. Professional. The hours at the range, the thousands of repetitions. The muscle memory drilled into him until it was as natural as breathing. One shot, one kill. Another shot. Another kill. He moved through the storm like Kincaid had, but differently. Not with her cold efficiency, but with something hotter, angrier, more human. Behind him, he heard Cole swear viciously, then the bark of the sergeant's rifle as he provided covering fire. "Suppress left flank," Kincaid's voice, no longer alarmed. Command voice. She'd made a decision to support the play instead of stopping it. The team shifted tactics instantly, their fire focusing on keeping the enemy's heads down while Vance pushed forward. He reached the first defensive position, a cluster of rocks where two enemy fighters had taken cover. They rose to engage him, but Vance was faster. 2 shots, 2 bodies. He kept moving. The enemy's formation started to crack. This wasn't how firefights were supposed to work. You didn't charge straight into superior numbers. You didn't walk into kill zones like you owned them. Except Vance was doing exactly that. And it was working. Because sometimes, just sometimes, audacity beats tactics. He hit the second position, his rifle empty, no time to reload. He dropped it, drew his sidearm, and put 3 rounds into the fighter who rose to meet him. The man went down. Vance grabbed his AK, checked the magazine, half full, and kept pushing. "Vance, pull back!" Kincaid's voice, urgent now. "You've broken their line. Now get out of there!" But Vance was beyond listening. He could see it now. The command element. 3 men, slightly separated from the others, better equipped, coordinating the attack. Take them out, and the whole operation falls apart. He angled toward them, using smoke from the burning wreckage as concealment, his mind crystal clear despite the chaos. This is what it feels like, he realized. This is what Kincaid experiences every time. Not fear, not hesitation, just clarity. The first commander saw him too late. Vance put 2 rounds center mass, watched him drop, and shifted to the second. But the second was faster. A burst of automatic fire tore through the air, and Vance felt something punch through his vest, high on the shoulder, not lethal, but stunning. He went down hard, rolled, came up firing. The second commander dropped. The third raised his rifle, and his head snapped back, a perfect through and through that painted the snow behind him red. Vance turned to see Kincaid, 50 meters away, her rifle still trained on where the target had been. Their eyes met across the battlefield. She nodded once. And then the enemy forces broke. Not retreated. Broke. Discipline shattered. Formation collapsed. They scattered into the storm like rats fleeing a sinking ship, leaving their dead and wounded behind. The sudden silence was deafening. Vance stood in the center of the kill zone, breathing hard, covered in blood, some his, some not, and realized he was still alive. They were all still alive. "LT," Cole's voice filled with something between awe and disbelief. That was the single most insane thing I have ever seen. And I once watched a man try to fistfight a bear in Alaska. Vance didn't respond. He was staring at his hands, at the rifle he was holding, trying to process what had just happened. Kincaid appeared beside him, her expression unreadable. "That," she said quietly, "was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've witnessed in 15 years of combat. I haven't decided which." "Did it work?" Vance asked. "You're alive. They're gone. So yes, Lieutenant, it worked." She paused. "But don't ever do it again." "Why not?" "Because next time you might not be lucky enough to have me watching your back." She turned and walked away, already shifting back into mission mode. "Harlow, status on Martinez?" "Stable. Barely, but he's not walking anytime soon." "Then we carry him. Cole, gather what ammunition we can from the dead. Vance," she stopped, looked back at him. "You're bleeding." "I'm aware." "Get it patched. We move in 5 minutes." "Where?" For the first time, Kincaid smiled. Not the Predator's smile. Something warmer, almost proud. "You tell me, Lieutenant. You just took command of this operation whether you meant to or not. So where are we going?" Vance blinked, caught off guard. Then he pulled out his wrist GPS, miraculously still functional, and studied the terrain. "There," he said, pointing northeast. "Old Soviet observation post, about 6 clicks from here. Concrete structure, defensible, and high enough to get line-of-sight communications once the storm clears." Kincaid studied the map, then nodded. "Good call. We move in 4 minutes. Get that shoulder patched." As she walked away, Cole sidled up to Vance, his face split in a grin despite the exhaustion. "So," the sergeant said, "about that whole following orders thing." "Don't," Vance warned. "I'm just saying, you went from boot lieutenant to action hero pretty quick there." "I lost my mind, temporarily." Yeah, well, your temporary insanity just saved all our lives. Cole clapped him on the good shoulder. I'd say that earns you at least one beer when we get home. Maybe two. Vance looked around at the carnage they'd created, at the team still standing, at Rourke and Martinez, both alive, both breathing, and at Kincaid, who was checking her rifle with the same mechanical efficiency she did everything, like the last 15 minutes of hell hadn't even fazed her. Cole, Vance said quietly. What is she? The sergeant's grin faded. Honestly, I stopped asking that question about 3 years ago. All I know is, when the world goes to hell, I want her on my side. He paused. And now? I'd say the same about you. Before Vance could respond, Kincaid's voice cut through the aftermath. Time's up. We move. Now. And they did. Through the storm, through the pain, through everything the mountain could throw at them. Because that's what operators do. They move forward. Even when forward is the only direction that doesn't lead to a grave. The Soviet observation post looked like a tombstone rising from the mountain, concrete and rust and 40 years of abandonment, but still standing when everything else had crumbled. Vance led them to it through terrain that tried to kill them with every step, his shoulder screaming where the round had punched through, his body running on fumes and spite. Behind him, Cole and Harlow carried Martinez between them. Rourke stumbled along under his own power now, conscious but barely, his face the color of old snow. And Kincaid brought up the rear, her rifle sweeping their back trail, silent and watchful as a ghost. They reached the structure as the storm finally began to break, not clearing but thinning enough to see more than 50 meters. The observation post was exactly what Vance had hoped for, 3-foot-thick concrete walls, a partially intact roof, and firing ports that covered the approaches. Defensible. Clear it, Kincaid ordered. Vance and Cole moved through the interior with practiced efficiency. Corners, doorways, the rusted stairwell leading to the upper level. Nothing but rat droppings and graffiti in Cyrillic. Clear, Vance called. Set security. Get the wounded inside. I want firing positions on all approaches and someone on that roof with eyes on the valley. The team moved like a machine despite their exhaustion. Martinez and Rourke were positioned in the most protected corner. Cole took the north-facing window. Harlow checked ammunition counts and began rationing what little they had left. Vance climbed to the roof. The view was both beautiful and terrible. Mountains stretched in every direction, white and endless and merciless. To the southwest, he could see the smoke from the downed Blackhawk, a dark smudge against the snow. And beyond that, movement, small figures, dozens of them, regrouping after the broken engagement. The enemy wasn't done. They were just getting started. How many? Kincaid's voice came from directly behind him, so quiet he almost jumped. 40, maybe 50. They're organizing into a proper assault element this time. Vance lowered his optic. We broke their first wave, but all we did was make them angry. And cautious, they'll approach differently now, slower, more methodical. She moved to the edge of the roof, studying the terrain with the focused intensity of someone reading a book. Which buys us time. Time for what? We're still cut off, still dark on communications, still alive, Kincaid interrupted, which is more than they expected. She pulled out a small handheld radio, analog, immune to the EMP burst, and began adjusting frequencies. The storm's breaking. That means SAR aircraft will launch as soon as they get clearance. We just need to hold long enough for them to find us. And if they don't? Kincaid looked at him then, really looked at him, and Vance saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before. Respect. Then we make them regret ever coming after us, she said quietly. But I don't think it'll come to that. You proved something back there, Lieutenant. To them, to the team. A pause. To me. What did I prove? That sometimes the book is wrong. Sometimes the only way out is through. She adjusted one more frequency, then set the radio aside. I've been doing this a long time. Seen a lot of officers freeze when the plan falls apart. You didn't freeze. You adapted. That's rare. Vance felt something uncomfortable twist in his chest. Not quite pride. More like validation from a source he hadn't realized he'd been desperate for. I thought I was going to die, he said. I thought we all were. We might still. But at least now we'll die fighting instead of cowering. Kincaid turned to go, then stopped. Question, Lieutenant. That charge you made, was it tactical calculation, or did you just snap? Vance thought about it. Both, neither. I saw an opening and I took it, without considering the risk. I considered it. I just didn't care anymore. Kincaid nodded slowly. That's the line. The one between effective aggression and suicidal stupidity. Most officers never learn where it is. You found it in your first real command situation. She started down the stairs. Impressive, terrifying, but impressive. Vance watched her go, then turned back to the valley. The enemy was moving again, spreading out, probing for weaknesses. They had maybe an hour before the assault began. He climbed down to find Harlow working on Martinez, the co-pilot's face pale but conscious now, gritting his teeth against pain as the medic adjusted the tourniquet. How is he? Vance asked. Alive. For now. But he needs a hospital, not a Soviet bunker. Harlow didn't look up from his work. Same with Rourke. The kid's tough, but that shoulder wound is infected. Without proper antibiotics, he'll go septic within 24 hours. Can you buy him more time? I can try. But Doc's not a miracle worker, LT. I'm just a medic with a near-empty med kit and a prayer. Vance moved to where Rourke sat propped against the wall, his skin clammy, his breathing shallow. The young SEAL's eyes tracked Vance's movement, still aware, still present. How you doing, petty officer? Vance asked. Been better, sir. Rourke's voice was barely a whisper. Been worse, too. When were you worse? A weak smile. Never. I lied. This is definitely the worst. Despite everything, Vance felt his mouth twitch. Hang in there. Rescue's coming. You sure about that? No, but I'm telling you anyway. Rourke closed his eyes. Fair enough. Vance found Cole at the north window, the sergeant's rifle propped on the sill, his eyes scanning the approaches with the patience of a professional hunter. They're coming, Cole said without looking away from his sight picture. Different formation this time. 3 elements, staggered approach, using the terrain for cover. Someone down there learned their lesson. How long? 45 minutes. Maybe less. Vance did the math in his head. 6 operators, 2 badly wounded, 4 functional. Maybe 300 rounds of ammunition total. No support, no reinforcements, no miracles. Against 50-plus hostiles who wanted them dead and had the numbers to make it happen. The math didn't work, unless they changed the equation. Cole, Vance said slowly. What do you know about the captain? Really know, I mean, not just the official record. The sergeant was quiet for a long moment. Why are you asking? Because she's carrying equipment that doesn't exist, using tactics that aren't in any manual, and surviving things that should have killed her. Vance leaned against the wall. I need to know who we're really following. Cole finally looked away from his rifle. You want the truth or the comfortable lie? Truth. The truth is I don't know, and I don't think I want to. Cole's voice dropped even lower. What I do know is this. 3 years ago, we got tasked with a black bag job in Kyrgyzstan, hostage rescue Chinese nationals held by a separatist group with serious backing. The kind of op where if it goes wrong, everyone involved disappears from the record. What happened? Everything went wrong. Cole paused, choosing his words carefully. She did something. I don't know what. The power went out across the entire compound, every light, every camera, every electronic lock. And in that darkness, she moved through the building like she could see in the dark. 45 seconds later, all 12 hostiles were dead and the hostages were secure. How? That's the question, isn't it? Cole turned back to his rifle. We asked. She told us it was classified and we should forget what we saw. So we did. Because sometimes, LT, you don't want to know how the magic trick works. You just appreciate that it saved your life. Vance absorbed that. And you never questioned it again? Oh, I questioned it. Every day for about 6 months. Then I realized something. Whatever she is, whatever program she's part of, she's on our side. And in this business, that's all that matters. Before Vance could respond, Kincaid's voice cut through the bunker. Everyone, center room, now. They gathered in the main chamber, Those who could walk, anyway. Martinez and Rourke stayed in their corner, but close enough to hear. Kincaid stood in the center, her rifle slung, her hands empty, her expression harder than Vance had ever seen it. "Time for truth," she said, "because we're past the point where secrets help anyone." The room went silent. "You've been asking questions," Kincaid continued, her eyes finding Vance. "About the equipment, the tactics, how I survived the blast. All fair questions. And you deserve answers." She paused. "What I'm about to tell you is classified at levels that don't officially exist. Sharing it is a career-ending violation, possibly worse, but given our current situation, I'm willing to accept those consequences." "Ma'am," Harlow said carefully, "you don't have to—" "Yes, I do." Kincaid's voice was flat. "Because if we don't make it out of here, someone needs to know what happened. And if we do make it out, you'll have questions that won't go away without answers." She took a breath. 15 years ago, JSOC initiated a classified program called Project Karin. The goal was to create operators capable of functioning in environments where conventional forces couldn't survive. Deep penetration missions, asymmetric warfare, situations where technology and traditional tactics weren't enough. She looked at each of them in turn. They selected candidates based on psychological profile, physical capability, and something else. Something harder to quantify. "What?" Cole asked. "Adaptability. The ability to process extreme stress and still make rational decisions. To operate at peak efficiency when everything is falling apart." Kincaid's jaw tightened. "They put us through— training isn't the right word. Conditioning, maybe. Breaking down everything we thought we knew about combat and rebuilding it from scratch." "How many people went through this program?" Vance asked. "Started with 47 candidates. 16 made it through the first year. 7 made it to operational status." Her eyes went distant. "I'm one of 3 still active." "The equipment," Harlow said. "The devices you've been using? Prototype technology. EMP generators, signal jammers, things that won't hit regular production for another decade. If they ever do." Kincaid pulled out the small radio she'd been working with earlier. "This, for example, operates on frequencies that technically don't exist. Quantum encrypted, impossible to intercept or jam with conventional methods." Cole whistled low. "And they just let you carry this stuff into the field?" "Let is a strong word. Karin operators have discretion. We're given tools and told to use them when necessary. The official position is plausible deniability. If something goes wrong, we were never there, the equipment never existed, and the program is a conspiracy theory." "That's insane," Vance said. "That's warfare." Kincaid's expression didn't change. "Conventional conflict is dying, Lieutenant. The future belongs to whoever can operate in the shadows with precision and zero footprint. Karin is the bleeding edge of that future." "And the blast?" Harlow asked quietly. "How did you really survive it?" Kincaid was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I didn't." The room went cold. "The IED detonated exactly as you saw. Shrapnel tore through my kit, broke 3 ribs, gave me a severe concussion. I should have died." She pulled back her sleeve, revealing a small device implanted just under the skin of her forearm, silver and angular, pulsing with a faint light. "This is a trauma beacon. Monitors vitals, administers emergency medications, and sends a distress signal if the wearer goes into cardiac arrest. It brought me back. Twice." "Jesus," Martinez breathed from his corner. "The beacon kept me alive long enough for the meds to kick in. Then I did what I was trained to do. I got up and went back to work." Kincaid's eyes were haunted now. "But understand this. I'm not superhuman. I'm not special. I'm just someone who refused to stay dead when dying would have been easier." Vance stared at her, trying to process everything he'd just heard. "Why are you telling us this?" "Because in about 30 minutes, that enemy force is going to hit this position with everything they have. And when they do, I'm going to use every trick, every piece of tech, every classified method I have to keep you alive." She met his gaze. "But I need you to trust me. All of you. Even when what I'm doing doesn't make sense. Even when it looks impossible. Can you do that?" "You've kept us alive this far," Cole said. "I'd say you've earned some trust." Harlow nodded. "Agreed. Martinez raised a shaky hand. Whatever gets us home, ma'am. Rourke managed a weak hoo-ah from his corner. And Vance? Vance looked at this woman who'd just revealed herself to be something between operator and experiment, and realized that every doubt he'd had, every question, every moment of suspicion, none of it mattered. Because she was right. She'd kept them alive. Against impossible odds, through impossible circumstances, she'd brought them this far. And that was enough. "You've got our trust, Captain," he said. "Now tell us how we win this." Kincaid's expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but close. The Predator's look back in full force. "We give them exactly what they expect," she said. "A desperate last stand by a cornered force with no options and no hope. We let them get close, let them think they've won, and then—" She pulled out another device, this one larger than the others, with a blinking indicator. "We introduce them to the concept of regret." "What is that?" Cole asked. "Directional charge. Think of it as a claymore mine that was designed by someone who really, really hates people. Placed correctly, it can turn a 100-meter kill zone into a graveyard in under 3 seconds. How many do you have?" 4. Cole grinned. "That might actually work." "It will work," Kincaid corrected, "but only if we play it perfectly. They can't suspect we have these. Which means we take casualties. We look desperate. We make them believe they're winning right up until the moment they're not." "That's risky," Harlow said. "That's warfare," Kincaid repeated. "Nothing about this is safe. But it's the best chance we have." She looked at Vance. "Lieutenant, you're with me. We're placing these charges at the 4 primary approach vectors. Cole, you're on overwatch. When I give the signal, you light them up. Harlow, you stay with the wounded and be ready to move if this goes sideways." "Define sideways," Martinez said weakly. "If the building starts collapsing or I'm dead, that's sideways. Everything else is just Wednesday." Despite the tension, despite the fear, someone laughed. Vance wasn't sure who. They spent the next 20 minutes placing the charges, Kincaid moving with absolute precision, Vance following her lead, learning with every step. She showed him how to read terrain for kill zones, how to predict enemy movement patterns, how to turn defensive positions into traps. It was like getting a masterclass in asymmetric warfare from someone who'd written the textbook and then burned it because it wasn't aggressive enough. "You're a natural at this," Kincaid said as they set the final charge. "Most officers think too much. Try to make everything complicated. You simplify. Find the core problem and hit it until it stops being a problem." Is that a compliment? It's an observation. Whether it's a compliment depends on whether you survive to use it. They made it back to the bunker with 10 minutes to spare. Cole was at his position, watching the approaches through his scope. They're moving. 3 elements, exactly as predicted. They'll be in range in 5 minutes. Kincaid checked her remote detonator, then looked at her team, battered, exhausted, running on empty, but still ready to fight. "Last chance for speeches," she said. "Anyone want to say something inspiring?" Silence. Then Rourke's voice, weak but clear. "Let's kill these bastards and go home." Kincaid smiled. Good enough. Positions. They waited. Vance watched from his window as the enemy forces advanced. Professional, careful, using fire and movement like they'd been trained by someone who knew what they were doing. Whoever was leading them wasn't making the same mistakes as before. They were learning, which made them dangerous. 200 meters, Cole called softly. "Hold," Kincaid said. The enemy spread out, covering multiple approaches, making themselves harder to target. 150. Hold. Closer now. Vance could see individual faces through his optic. Young men, most of them. Professionals doing a job. He felt no sympathy. They'd chosen this. They'd hunted his team. They tried to kill people he was responsible for keeping alive. And now they were going to pay for it. 100. Almost, Kincaid murmured, her hand on the detonator. 50 meters. 40. The enemy forces were completely exposed now, spread across the kill zones like pieces on a board, perfectly positioned. 30 meters. "Now," Kincaid said. And the world exploded. The directional charges detonated simultaneously, 4 walls of tungsten fragments traveling at supersonic speeds, turning the approaches into a meat grinder. The sound was catastrophic, apocalyptic, the kind of violence that makes the earth shake. When the dust cleared, the enemy force was shattered, not defeated, not destroyed, but broken. "Finish them!" Kincaid roared. The team opened fire, controlled bursts picking off survivors, anyone still moving, anyone still a threat. Vance's rifle barked in his hands, the recoil familiar now, almost comforting. This was what he'd trained for. This was why he'd joined, to protect his people, by any means necessary. The firefight lasted 90 seconds. When it was over, the approaches were silent. "Status," Kincaid called. "North clear. East clear. No movement south." Vance scanned his sector through the scope, searching for targets, for threats, for anything. Nothing. Just bodies and snow and the terrible quiet that follows violence. "They're pulling back," Cole said, disbelief in his voice. "The survivors are retreating." Kincaid moved to the roof, confirming it with her own eyes. When she came back down, her expression was neutral, but Vance thought he saw something in her eyes. Relief. "It's over," she said. "For now." "For now?" Harlow asked. "They'll regroup, probably call in reinforcements, but it'll take time, and time is what we needed." She activated her quantum radio, adjusting frequencies with practiced ease. "SAR frequencies are opening up. Storm's breaking enough for rotary operations. We just need to—" The radio crackled to life. "Any coalition forces? This is Rescue 79er, conducting search operations Northeast Sector. If you can hear this transmission, respond on emergency band Alpha." Kincaid keyed the mic. "Rescue 79er, this is Reaper 6 Actual. We are 6 operators, 2 critical wounded, requesting immediate extraction. Grid coordinates to follow." A pause. Then, "Reaper 6, you're alive? Command listed your team as KIA 12 hours ago. Reports of our death were greatly exaggerated. Can you reach our position or not?" "Stand by." Another pause. Longer this time. Then, "Confirmed. We have your coordinates. 2 Blackhawks inbound. ETA 20 minutes. We're bringing the whole cavalry, Captain. Sit tight." Kincaid closed her eyes, and for just a moment, the mask dropped. She looked tired. Human. Mortal. "Roger that, Rescue 79er. We'll be here." She set the radio down and looked at her team, at Vance, at Cole, at Harlow, at the wounded operators who'd fought and bled and refused to die. 20 minutes, she said. "We hold for 20 more minutes, and this is over. 20 minutes. It felt like a lifetime. It felt like no time at all. They held. And when the Blackhawks appeared through the clearing storm, when the door gunners took position and the pilots put those birds down like they were parking cars, Vance felt something break inside him. Not fear, not relief, just the simple, overwhelming knowledge that they'd survived. Against impossible odds, through impossible circumstances, they'd survived. The evacuation was mechanical. Martinez loaded first, then Rourke. The rest of the team followed, weapons still ready, still watching for threats until the very last second. Kincaid stepped aboard last, as always, and only when everyone was accounted for did she finally lower her rifle. The Black Hawk lifted off, banking hard away from the mountain, and Vance watched through the open door as the Soviet bunker fell away below them, that concrete tombstone that had been their fortress for one impossible stand. He'd remember it forever. "Lieutenant," Kincaid's voice, quiet against the rotor noise. He looked at her. "You did good," she said. "Really good." Vance nodded, too exhausted for words. But in her eyes, he saw something that mattered more than any medal or commendation. Respect. From someone who didn't give it lightly. And that, he thought, was worth every frozen step, every desperate fight, every moment when death had been close enough to taste. They flew toward safety, toward warmth, toward a future that had seemed impossible just hours before. And behind them, the mountain kept its secrets. At least for now. The Blackhawk's rotor wash blasted snow across the landing pad at Blackwell Military Medical, and before the skids even touched concrete, the trauma teams were already moving. Stretchers, medical equipment, voices shouting coordinates and triage codes over the engine noise. Vance stepped off the bird into controlled chaos. Rourke went first, unconscious now, his vitals weak but present. The surgical team surrounded him like a protective shell, already calling for blood, for antibiotics, for the operating room. Martinez followed on a second stretcher, his face gray but his eyes tracking the movement around him with the awareness of someone still fighting to stay conscious. "Keep them alive," Kincaid said to the lead surgeon, a hard-eyed major with blood already on her scrubs from previous cases. "I don't care what it takes." "We will, Captain," the major said, already moving. "But you need medical attention too. That head wound—" "Later." Kincaid's voice was iron. "My people first." The major started to argue, saw something in Kincaid's expression, and nodded. 30 minutes. Then you're in my chair whether you want to be or not. Fair enough? The surgical teams disappeared into the building, taking Rourke and Martinez with them, and suddenly the landing pad was quiet except for the dying whine of the Blackhawk's engines spinning down. Vance stood in the sudden stillness, his body finally starting to register what his mind had been too busy to process. The cold, the pain, the bone-deep exhaustion that made even standing feel like a triumph. "LT." Cole appeared beside him, moving like every joint hurt. "You good?" "Define good." "Vertical, breathing, not actively dying." "Then yeah, I'm good." Vance looked at the sergeant. "You?" "I'll live. Probably." Cole's grin was tired but genuine. "We all will. Thanks to you." "Thanks to Kincaid," Vance corrected. "Thanks to both of you." Cole's expression turned serious. "What you did back there, the charge, the bunker defense, keeping everyone moving, that was leadership, Lieutenant. Real leadership. The kind you can't teach." Before Vance could respond, Harlow joined them, his medic's kit looking like it had been through a war, which Vance supposed it had. "Just got word from surgery," Harlow said. "Rourke's in the OR now. They're optimistic but cautious. Martinez is stable, heading into surgery in 20 minutes. He paused. "We got them here in time. Barely, but we did it." The three of them stood there, not quite celebrating, not quite mourning, just existing in the strange liminal space that comes after survival. "Captain wants to see you," Harlow said to Vance. "Debrief room, 3rd floor. Said to give you 10 minutes to clean up first." Vance nodded, suddenly aware of how he must look, covered in blood and mud and mountain grime, his uniform torn, his face probably sporting bruises he hadn't even noticed yet. 10 minutes, he said. "Then I'll be there." He found the showers on the 2nd floor, institutional tile and harsh fluorescent lighting that made everything look worse than it was. The hot water felt like a gift from a generous universe, washing away layers of filth and fear. When he looked in the mirror afterward, he barely recognized himself. The face looking back was harder than it had been 72 hours ago. Older. The eyes carried weight they hadn't before, the kind of weight that comes from making life and death decisions and living with the consequences. This is what command looks like, he thought. This is what it costs. He dressed in fresh fatigue someone had left for him and made his way to the 3rd floor. The debrief room was small, windowless, lit by overhead lights that hummed slightly. A table, 4 chairs, and nothing else. Kincaid was already there. She'd cleaned up too, fresh uniform, the blood washed from her face, but she still carried the injuries. The bandage on her temple, the careful way she held herself that spoke of broken ribs, the exhaustion around her eyes that no amount of coffee could fix. "Close the door," she said. Vance did. "Sit." He sat. For a long moment they just looked at each other across the table, two people who'd walked through hell together and somehow made it out the other side. "Official debrief happens tomorrow," Kincaid said finally. "With the brass, the intelligence people, everyone who wants to know what happened on that mountain. But I wanted to talk to you first, unofficially." "All right. What I told you earlier about Project Cairn, the equipment, all of it, that information could end my career, could end yours too if you repeat it to the wrong people." She leaned forward slightly. "So I need to know, can I trust you to keep it classified?" Vance didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Why?" "Because you kept us alive. Because you trusted us with the truth when you didn't have to. And because—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Because whatever Karin is, whatever you are, you used it to bring everyone home. That's what matters." Kincaid studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Good answer." She pulled out a slim folder, slid it across the table. "This is the after-action report I'm filing. It's clean. No mention of classified equipment. No details that would raise flags. Just a straightforward account of a mission that went sideways and a team that fought their way out. Vance opened the folder, skimmed the contents. It was all there. The downed pilot, the ambush, the helicopter crash, the final stand. But sanitized. Professional. The kind of report that would satisfy the bureaucracy without revealing anything that mattered. "You're leaving out the important parts," he said. "The important parts are classified, and they'll stay that way." Kincaid's eyes were hard. "The official version is that we got lucky, fought hard, and survived through training and determination. That's the story. That's what goes in the record. And the truth? The truth is for the three of us who know it, and it stays buried." She paused. "Can you live with that?" Vance thought about it, about the devices he'd seen, the implant under Kincaid's skin, the capabilities that shouldn't exist. And he thought about Rourke, fighting for his life in surgery, about Martinez, who'd lost a pilot and nearly his leg, about Cole and Harlow, who'd followed orders without question even when those orders led through hell. They deserved the truth, but maybe some truths were too dangerous to speak aloud. "Yeah," Vance said finally, "I can live with that." "Good." Kincaid pulled the folder back, closed it. "Now let's talk about what happens next." "What do you mean?" "You led a team through impossible circumstances and brought everyone home alive. That doesn't go unnoticed. Command is going to want to promote you, fast-track you, put you in positions with more responsibility." She tilted her head. "Question is, do you want that?" Vance hadn't thought about it, hadn't had time to think about anything beyond survival. "I don't know," he admitted. "Then figure it out. Because leadership isn't something that gets forced on you. It's something you choose. Every day. Every decision." Kincaid's expression softened slightly. "You have the instinct for it. The ability to see the problem and solve it, even when the solution is terrifying. But instinct isn't enough. You need to want it." "Did you?" "Want it, I mean." She was quiet for a long moment. "I wanted to be useful, to make a difference. And I was willing to pay whatever price that required." Her hand moved unconsciously to where the implant was hidden under her sleeve. 15 years later, I'm still paying, and I'm still not sure if it was worth it. Would you do it again?" "Every time." No hesitation. "Because the alternative is standing on the sidelines while people die. And I can't live with that." Vance understood. Because he'd felt the same thing on that mountain, the absolute unwillingness to let his people die while he still had breath in his body and a weapon in his hands. Maybe that's what leadership really was. Not tactics or strategy or following the manual, just the refusal to quit when quitting would be easier. "I want to keep going," he said, "whatever that looks like. I want to keep leading." Kincaid smiled, a real smile this time, not the predator's grin. "Good. Then we'll make it happen." She stood, winced slightly as her ribs protested. "Get some rest, Lieutenant. Tomorrow's going to be a long day of questions and paperwork, and people who weren't there trying to understand what happened." "What will you tell them?" "The truth. The version they're cleared to hear anyway." She moved toward the door, then stopped. "One more thing. What you did on that mountain, the charge, the decision-making, all of it, that wasn't luck. That was you. Don't let anyone tell you different. Not the brass, not your father, not the voice in your head that says you weren't ready." Vance felt something catch in his throat. "How did you know about my father?" "I read your file. I read everyone's file. Part of the job." Her expression was unreadable. "He's wrong, by the way. About you. About what you're capable of. You proved that." And then she was gone, the door closing softly behind her. Vance sat alone in the debrief room, processing everything that had happened, everything that had been said. 3 days ago, he'd been a junior officer trying to live up to impossible expectations. Now he was someone who'd walked through fire and come out the other side. Not unscathed, not unchanged, but alive. He found Cole and Harlow in the medical wing, both of them watching through the observation window as a surgical team worked on Rourke. The young SEAL was laid out on the table, surrounded by machines and monitors, his life reduced to numbers on a screen. "How's he doing?" Vance asked quietly. "Better than expected," Harlow said. "The infection hadn't spread as far as I feared. They got the shoulder cleaned out, repaired the damage. He'll live. Probably keep the arm too. And Martinez? Surgery went well. Femoral arteries repaired, legs saved. He'll walk again, but his flying days might be over. Cole's voice was rough. Small price for staying alive. They stood in silence, watching the surgeons work with the focused intensity of people fighting death and winning. We should have lost people, Cole said finally. By every metric, every probability, we should have left bodies on that mountain, but we didn't. Kincaid, Harlow said simply. And the LT, Cole added, glancing at Vance. Don't sell yourself short. You made calls that kept us moving when stopping would have killed us. Vance didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Sometimes silence was its own answer. The three of them stayed there for another hour, watching over Rourke like guardian angels who'd almost failed their assignment but pulled it off in the end. When the surgery finished and the doctors gave the thumbs up, stable, recovering, expected to make a full recovery, Vance felt something release in his chest. They'd done it. Against impossible odds, through impossible circumstances, they'd brought everyone home. Not unscathed, not unchanged, but alive. The official debrief happened the next morning in a conference room that smelled of coffee and bureaucracy. A full colonel, 2 intelligence officers, and someone from JSOC's oversight committee who never gave a name. They asked questions for 4 hours straight. Vance told them the story. The sanitized version, the one that didn't include classified equipment or programs that didn't officially exist. The ambush, the helicopter crash, the running firefight, the last stand at the Soviet bunker. Kincaid corroborated everything, her answers precise and professional, giving them enough detail to satisfy without revealing anything that mattered. Cole and Harlow did the same. By the end, the brass seemed satisfied. Impressed, even. Exceptional performance under extreme duress, the colonel said, making notes. Textbook leadership under fire. This will go in all of your records as commendable conduct. Vance waited for the other shoe to drop. Questions about the equipment, about how Kincaid had survived, about things that didn't add up. But it never came. Either they didn't see the inconsistencies, or they'd been told not to look too closely. Project Cairn, protecting its own. The debrief ended with handshakes and assurances that this wouldn't be forgotten, that their actions mattered, that the service appreciated their sacrifice. Empty words mostly, but well-intentioned. Vance left the conference room feeling like he'd just survived a second firefight. Different weapons, same objective. He found Kincaid on the roof of the medical building, standing at the edge, looking out over the mountains in the distance. The same mountains that had tried to kill them. Debrief go well? She asked without turning. As well as could be expected. They bought the official version. They always do. People believe what they want to believe. She finally looked at him. Your father called while you were in the conference room, left a message with the admin office. Vance's stomach tightened. What did he want? To talk to you. Said he'd heard about what happened, wanted to make sure you were all right. Kincaid's expression was neutral. You going to call him back? I don't know, maybe. Vance moved to stand beside her, looking out at the same view. What would you do? Me? I'd tell him the truth, that you led a team through hell and brought everyone home, that you made command decisions that saved lives, that you earned your place. She paused. But that's me. You have to decide what you need from that conversation. Vance thought about his father, the colonel who'd expected excellence and got a son who'd always felt one step behind, the man who'd sent him to the academy with the assumption that discipline could fix whatever was broken. And he thought about the person he'd become on that mountain, not perfect, not fearless, but capable. I'll call him, Vance said, but not today. Today I need to check on my team. Kincaid nodded approvingly. Good answer. Your people first, always. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, 2 operators who'd survived something most people would never understand. Question, Vance said finally. That implant, the trauma beacon, does it hurt? Every day, Kincaid said quietly, but it keeps me alive. And as long as I'm alive, I can do my job. So I accept the cost. Is it worth it? She was quiet for a long time. Ask me again in 10 years, if I'm still here. Vance found Rourke awake that evening, propped up in a hospital bed, his shoulder immobilized but his eyes clear for the first time in days. "LT," the young SEAL said, his voice rough from intubation. "You look like hell." "You should see the other guys," Vance replied, pulling up a chair. "How you feeling?" "Like I got shot, frozen, and then cut open. So pretty standard Tuesday." Rourke's attempt at humor was weak, but genuine. "Doc says I'll make a full recovery. Keep the arm, keep my career. Just need physical therapy and time." "You'll have both. And when you're ready, you'll come back stronger." "You think so?" "I know so. You fought through conditions that would have killed most people. That's not luck, petty officer. That's who you are." Rourke's eyes got suspiciously bright. "Thank you, sir, for not leaving me behind, for getting me out. That's what we do. We don't leave people behind." Vance stood, clapped him gently on the good shoulder. "Rest up. We'll need you back in fighting shape." He found Martinez in another room, the co-pilot awake but clearly on serious pain medication, his leg elevated and wrapped in enough bandages to make him look like a mummy. "Lieutenant," Martinez said, blinking slowly, "they tell me you're the reason I'm alive." "Captain Kincaid's the reason. I just helped." "Well, whoever's responsible, thank you." "Really?" Martinez's voice dropped. "The captain. He was a good man, good pilot. He deserved better than—" "I know. And we'll make sure his family knows he died doing his job, protecting his crew." Vance's throat tightened. "He won't be forgotten." None of us will," Martinez said quietly. "That's what they tell me. That this mission, whatever happened up there, it matters. It's going in the history books." Vance doubted that. The official version would get filed away, classified, forgotten, but the truth, the real story of what happened on that mountain, would live on in the 6 people who'd survived it. And maybe that was enough. He spent the rest of the week at Blackwell, watching his team heal, watching them process what they'd been through. Harlow threw himself into helping the other medics, keeping busy to avoid thinking. Cole divided his time between the gym and visiting Rourke, working through his own demons in the only ways he knew how. And Kincaid disappeared for 2 days, called away by people who didn't identify themselves, returning with new orders and an expression that said the debrief hadn't been as clean as she'd made it sound. But she didn't share details, and Vance didn't ask. Some things were need to know, and he didn't need to know. On the 7th day, Vance finally made the call. His father answered on the 2nd ring. "Caleb." The colonel's voice was exactly as Vance remembered. Firm, controlled, carrying expectations even in a greeting. "Sir, I heard what happened. The mission, the casualties, the survival." A pause. "Are you all right?" "I'm alive. My team's alive. That's what matters." Another pause, longer this time. "Your commanding officer sent me a report, unofficial. Said you displayed exceptional leadership under extreme conditions, that you made decisions that saved lives." The colonel's voice shifted slightly, something almost like pride creeping in. "I wanted you to know I was wrong. About you. About what you're capable of." Vance felt something crack inside him, not breaking, opening. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Don't thank me. You earned this. All of it." The colonel cleared his throat. "When you get back stateside, if you want to talk, really talk, I'd like that." "I'd like that too." They spoke for another 10 minutes. Awkward but genuine, 2 people who'd spent years talking past each other finally finding common ground. When Vance hung up, he felt lighter somehow, like a weight he'd been carrying since the academy had finally been set down. The day before they were scheduled to rotate back to base, Kincaid called the team together one last time. They gathered in a small briefing room, all 6 of them, counting Rourke in his wheelchair and Martinez on crutches. "I wanted to say this before we scatter to different assignments and the bureaucracy swallows us whole," Kincaid said. "What happened on that mountain, what we went through together, that's not something that gets talked about at promotion boards or written up in after-action reports. But it's real. It matters." She looked at each of them in turn. "Cole, you held the line when everything was falling apart. That's what sergeants do, and you did it perfectly. Harlow, you kept people alive with almost nothing to work with. That's not medicine, that's magic. Martinez, you stayed professional even after losing your captain. That takes courage most people don't have. Rourke, you fought through conditions that would have killed most operators twice your age. You've earned your place on this team 100 times over. And Vance, she held his gaze. You stepped up when leadership was needed, and you delivered. You made the hard calls, took the risks, and brought everyone home. That's not just good leadership. That's exceptional leadership. The room was quiet. I'm proud to have served with all of you, Kincaid said, and I'm honored to call you my team. Whatever happens next, whatever assignments we draw, remember this. We survived because we trusted each other, because we refused to quit, because we were better together than any of us could be alone. She raised her coffee cup. To Reaper Team, to the mountain that tried to kill us, and to the fact that we're still here to tell the story. They raised their own cups, coffee, water, whatever was available. To Reaper Team, they echoed. And in that moment, Vance understood something fundamental about leadership, about war, about the bonds that form between people who've walked through fire together. It wasn't about tactics or strategy or following the manual. It was about the people beside you, the ones who trust you to lead them into hell and back out again. Everything else was just noise. 2 months later, Vance stood in front of a classroom at the Naval Special Warfare Training Center, looking at 30 fresh-faced candidates who thought they knew what they were getting into. They didn't. But he'd helped them learn. Leadership, he said, his voice carrying to the back row, isn't about being fearless. It's not about always having the right answer or never making mistakes. Leadership is about making decisions when you don't have enough information, when every option looks bad, when people are counting on you and you're terrified of letting them down. He paused, remembering snow and blood and impossible choices. It's about the moment when everything falls apart, and you have to decide. Do you freeze, or do you move forward? Do you quit, or do you fight? Do you save yourself, or do you bring everyone home? The candidates stared at him, not quite understanding yet. They would eventually, if they survived long enough. The mountain doesn't care about your plans, Vance continued. The enemy doesn't care about your training. And when the storm comes, and it will come, the only thing that matters is the person next to you and whether you trust them to have your back when death is close enough to taste. He thought about Kincaid, wherever she was now. About Cole and Harlow, back in the teams. About Rourke, fighting through physical therapy with the same stubbornness that had kept him alive on the mountain. About Martinez, learning to walk again, determined to fly again. About the pilot who didn't make it home. You're going to face moments where everything you think you know is wrong, Vance said, where the manual doesn't have answers and your training feels inadequate. In those moments, you fall back on the only thing that matters, your people, your team, the ones who'll walk through hell beside you because you do the same for them. He looked at the candidates, seeing himself in their eager faces. That's leadership, not the textbook version, the real version, the one that gets people home alive. The classroom was silent. Vance smiled slightly. Now get out of my classroom and go train, because everything I just said is useless until you prove it under fire. Dismissed. As the candidates filed out, talking among themselves, processing what they'd heard, Vance felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Kincaid standing there, her presence as unexpected as always. Good speech, she said. Learned from the best. Flattery. But she was smiling. I heard about the promotion. Congratulations, Lieutenant Commander Vance. Just trying to live up to the standard you set, Captain. You already have. Kincaid's expression turned serious. I'm rotating to a new assignment next month. Different theater, different mission set, but I wanted to check in before I disappeared again. Make sure you were still what? Still the person who walked out of that mountain. Sometimes people change after something like that. Not always for the better. Vance thought about it. I did change, but not in the way you're worried about. I'm more confident, more willing to trust my instincts, less concerned with being perfect and more focused on being effective. Good, Kincaid nodded. Then my work here is done. Will I see you again? Maybe. Probably. The community's small and people like us tend to find each other. She turned to go, then stopped. One more thing. The mountain. What happened there? It stays with you. Forever. Don't try to forget it. Don't try to bury it. Just accept that it's part of who you are now and move forward. Is that what you did? Every day for 15 years. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. And I'm still moving forward. And then she was gone, disappearing into the corridor like smoke, leaving Vance alone with his thoughts and his memories, and the weight of leadership that felt less like a burden now and more like a purpose. He walked outside into sunlight that felt too bright after the darkness of the classroom, the warmth almost offensive after so many frozen hours on the mountain. But he was alive. They were all alive. And tomorrow he'd teach another class, train another generation of operators, pass on the lessons he'd learned in blood and ice and desperate choices. Because that's what survivors do. They move forward. They honor the fallen by living fully. They take the hard lessons and they share them, hoping that somewhere down the line, someone else won't have to learn them the same way. Vance pulled out his phone, looked at a text from Rourke. Physical therapy is kicking my ass, but I'm walking without crutches now. Thanks for not giving up on me, LT. He smiled and typed back. Never crossed my mind. See you on the teams, petty officer. Then he looked up at the mountains in the distance. Not the same mountains, but close enough, and felt no fear. Just respect. And the absolute certainty that if he ever had to walk through hell again, he'd do it with his head up and his people beside him. Because in the worst storms, when everything falls apart and death feels inevitable, leadership isn't about being the loudest voice or the most decorated officer. It's about the quiet choice to come back for your people, to stand when others would run, to fight when others would surrender. It's about bringing everyone home, no matter the cost. In the worst storm, leadership isn't found in rank or medals. It lives in the choice to come back, to stand firm, and to bring everyone home.